a few years ago when I came out and attended one of Envision's meetings. Aaron put on a phenomenal presentation using the book, The Compound Effect. And I loved it so much, I asked her if she would mind sharing her information. She sent me the book, and I didn't copy her presentation exactly, but I have completely redone my presentation that I give. I incorporated what I was doing with it. Can everybody hear me? Okay. But anyway, so I reconfigured my presentation incorporating the Compound Effect book. So some of the things that I present might be a little bit familiar, but I'm hoping that I also bring some new things as well. Okay, so are you seeing my screen here? Oh, let's see.
Yep, we see it, Greg. I see it.
Okay, so I need to somehow, I've got so much stuff on here. All right, we're going to try to just deal it. So you just see my screen that says discipline of appointment setting. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Again, what inspired me many years ago, I was an agent, just like you are. I started in this profession 26 years ago, and I worked for a funeral home in Hutchinson, Kansas, which is originally my home. And my mother was my first pre-need manager. She had been working at this funeral home and selling funeral
the woman came by.
a couple of years.
Hey, Greg, would you unmute yourself now? I went ahead and muted everybody. Would you unmute yourself? Sorry. Go ahead. You're okay.
There we go. So my mother was my first pre-need manager. She had been selling for the local funeral home for a couple of years, and I was just in a job that I wasn't happy with, and she encouraged me to give it a try. And so I remember my very first day sitting down with the telephone to start making phone calls. Can any of you remember that day? If you were like me, I was scared to death. It was very nerve-wracking. And you know, prospecting really, in my opinion, is one of the most important jobs that we have, because we can learn to give a fantastic presentation and we can be a great closer. But if we can't be disciplined enough when it comes to the prospecting and the appointment setting, all of that doesn't matter. So prospecting and being disciplined about it became very near and dear to my heart. So that is why I am addressing this, and I completely understand what you go through on a daily basis. So if you will, I want to take you on a little journey, except that my screen is not advancing. So, all right, so West, I normally just hit the arrow button and it makes everything advance, but that's not happening.
Oh, click on the screen first, Greg. Try to just click on the screen and then push the arrows. Does that work?
There we go. Okay. All right, so I want to take you on a little bit of a journey, if you will. I am your captain, and we have been on board flight 1532 headed from Los Angeles to New York City. And as we begin our final approach and landing, I just want to thank you, number one, for flying with Envision Air today. As we begin our descent, there are two announcements that I want to make. Number one, we will be landing 20 minutes early, which is fantastic. We always look to have an on-time arrival. Unfortunately, my second piece of news is not so good. I made a slight 1% error in my flight plan today. And so rather than landing in New York City, we are going to land in Delaware. I hope this doesn't cause too many problems for you. I hope you have a fantastic day, and please fly with Envision Air again soon. We look forward to seeing you. Okay, if you were on this flight and you had just heard that announcement, how would you be feeling about right now? Probably not so good. You'd probably be very irritated with me as your pilot. But I only made a 1-degree error. But the thing is that we were flying from Los Angeles to New York. That's a lot of distance and a lot of time. Had the flight been from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, probably wouldn't have made a whole lot of difference. But because it was over such a period of time and distance, the problem got bigger and bigger. My contention is that we make a lot of small little mistakes as we go through our day. As we go through our processes, we make little small decisions that really can affect us quite negatively. So I want you to think about that as we go. So if you've read the compound effect, as Aaron gave the book to me, I don't know if you have that, but if you haven't, I encourage you to get a copy of it and read it. I really should get commission off it, or maybe Aaron should, because I know I've sold a lot of books for the author. It's a fantastic book. It's an easy read, but the whole thing is about making small, smart choices consistently, done over time. And if you do those things, it can make a very radical difference in your life. I know that it did mine. It really challenged my thinking, and I made a lot of changes as a result of after reading the book. As we go through and talk today, there are 3 things that we're going to talk about. The first thing that we're going to discuss today are the choices that we make. So when it comes to the choices that we make, okay, my screen is not advancing. There we go. Just a little bit of trial and error. I'm used to Zoom. I haven't done a whole lot of go-to meetings. So when it really comes down to it, the way I see it anyway, and I suppose it can be debated to some degree, but really as a pre-need agent, this is not rocket science. It really boils down to, we have 2 jobs that we're doing, that we should be doing at all times. And if we focus on those things, and we judge the decisions that we make through the day by these 2 jobs, it can make a lot of difference in what we get involved with or what we don't. So the first job that we have, obviously, is prospecting. By prospecting, whether it's by the phone, whether you're out in the field, there's a number of ways that we prospect. But by doing that, that's what leads us to the second job that we actually have, which might be coming to your mind, but that is to be on an appointment. And whether our appointment is a one-on-one presentation or whether we're with somebody in their home or that you're meeting them at the funeral home, there's a lot of different ways of being on an appointment. But really, everything we do boils down to being one of these 2 things all the time. If we focus on being on one or the other all the time, then we can use our time to the very best, to the most effectiveness that we possibly can. So what we have to remember in what we do, in these choices that we make and how they measure against those 2 jobs that I just talked about, is that the compound effect, it works. It always works. Whether you've read the book or not, everything we do, the compound effect actually works. And I'm going to demonstrate some of this. So let's look at a few decisions that we might make through the day and just see exactly how they might affect us in the long term, if you will. So if we think about those 2 jobs that we have, either prospecting or being on an appointment, does doing this activity right here fit into one of those activities? 5 more prospecting calls or call it a day. Let's say that you just went out on an appointment and you made a sale, and now you have the choice. Maybe you made a great commission and you're on a high, And so you think, do I really need to prospect anymore? I'm just gonna call it a day, and maybe it's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So what happens if we just make 5 more calls during the day, or we just call it quits for the day? The second decision is I'm going to scroll through Facebook. Now, does that really fit into one of those two things? It really doesn't. And you know, the thing is that I don't know if I'm the only one. I hope not, but I find myself as I'm going through the day, midday, I think, you know, what's happening? What's happening on social media? I click on it, thinking I'm just going to take a quick look for 5 minutes. 5 minutes turns into 30 minutes. You're scrolling and you're scrolling and you're scrolling, and pretty soon you have lost a lot of valuable time, in time that you could have been prospecting or doing something different, something that's actually going to make you money. So scrolling through Facebook probably doesn't fit within those two jobs that we just talked about very well. What about building in an evening or a Saturday morning in your prospecting schedule? That can really be an advantage. I want to encourage you, if you want an increase in your pay, build in an off time other than a Monday through Friday 9 to 5. Because if you'll build in an off time, whether it's of an evening or a Saturday morning, into your prospecting schedule, you're going to catch people that are not at home during 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. And it can help you reach some younger people. And the younger people, you tend to make a little bit more commission on. So let's say you don't change your, you know, the amount of business you write in a given month. You write $100,000, but your average age is 75, or you write $100,000 and your average age is 70. You're going to make more money with an average age of 70 than you do at age 75. So if you can reach some younger people in these off hours, that's going to make your prospecting time more beneficial. What about going to the funeral home early to review at-need files for aftercare follow-up? This is something that was important to me as an agent. I wanted to be as productive as I could in the times between 9 and 5. I didn't like to do too much telephoning before 9 o'clock, just because the age category of people that we tend to deal with, they like to sleep in a little bit longer. And so and oftentimes they do, not all of them, but many of them do. And so I didn't want to be calling them too early in the morning. And so I used that hour from 8 to 9 to use that to prepare for my day. So I spent a lot of time call prepping from 8 to 9 in the morning. What about eating a bag of chips and drinking a soda if you're not hungry? It doesn't fit into one of the two jobs, and the only reason I bring this up is the compound effect. It's not all about business. It's also about personal decisions that we make. And personal decisions, they can be tough. And eating enough bags and chips can have, over time, done consistently, can have some pretty negative effects. So I just want to encourage you. We want to make good decisions in our business, but we also want to make great decisions as far as our personal decisions as well. So as we go on through, the last thing I'm going to bring up here is call on a church or another organization about doing a group presentation. This can be awesome. It's a great way to prospect. Definitely fits within one of the two jobs that I talked about. And it's a great way to meet, to actually present to a large group of people and not just one-on-one, and can result in many sales. So it's a great way, a great thing to add to your prospecting. So let's take the first thing that I mentioned. What if I talk to 5 more people in a day? So five extra conversations per day equals an extra half an appointment each day. Half an appointment per day equates to 3 appointments per week. 3 appointments per week gives you an extra 1.5 sales per week. That's assuming a 50% closing ratio. 1.5 sales per week comes up to 6 sales per month. 6 sales per month gives us $39,000 in volume. $39,000 per month in volume equates to $468,000 annually. If we take that times an average commission percentage of 8%, that's $37,440 in commission. And that most importantly means that we've helped 72 families on a very difficult day. What does that sound like? 5 extra conversations can be pretty powerful, can't it? But maybe we're not going to make 5 extra have 5 extra conversations each day. Maybe we just want to prospect 1 more day per week. You know, I mentioned maybe building in an evening or a Saturday morning. Saturday used to be a very key time for me when I was prospecting. I would go in and phone from about 9 in the morning until 1 o'clock in the afternoon because I wanted to set my Monday and Tuesday up. So that was a very important thing for me. But so what if you just build in 1 extra day or 1 extra time per week that you're going to do some prospecting? And you have 10 conversations in that day. So you have 10 conversations, gives you 1 more appointment per week. 1 more appointment per week gives you 2 more sales per month. 2 more sales per month gives you $13,000 in volume. I'm just going with an average contract size of $6,500 here. Your average contract size may vary depending on where you live. $13,000 in volume equates to an annual volume of $156,000. $156,000 at 8% commission gives you a $12,480 in commission. Who wouldn't like an extra $12,480 in commission in a year? That's a nice little bonus. But most importantly, you've helped 24 more families. So there are 2 examples right there of how making a very simple decision, whether you want to make 5 more phone calls a day, every day, or whether you just want to build in 1 extra day of prospecting. What effects can that have? And this shows you right here, the effects, if you do this consistently over time, how that is going to have a payoff. The second thing that I'm going to talk about today is routine. Routine is very important. It's something that I tend to just, you know, thrive on a routine. I'm a morning person, so I like to get up early in the morning. I like to read. I work out and do various things in the morning, and it just really helps me get my day started right. But Darren Hardy, who is the author of The Compound Effect, made the comment that a daily routine built on good habits and discipline separates the most successful among us from everyone else, and a routine is exceptionally powerful. So let's look at routine. This particular routine here, as I mentioned, I want you to keep in mind the 2 jobs that I talked about, either prospecting or being on an appointment. This was my routine. You don't have to do my routine. I'm just encouraging you to have a routine that works for you. But this is how I worked very hard to structure my week. And I'm going to start kind of at the end of the week, if you will, because it's really determined what the things I did on Saturday kind of determined how the rest of my week was going to go. So I want to start with Saturday. And as I mentioned a little bit ago, I started doing my prospecting at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I worked until about 1 o'clock. My goal was to set up my Monday and my Tuesday just as full as I could get it, especially Monday. I don't know about you, but Mondays are hard enough. And to walk in on a Monday morning and have absolutely nothing going was just something I didn't want to have to face. And so I was willing to give up a little of my time on Saturday morning. I would usually, as I'll show you here in a minute, I usually took Friday afternoon off to spend time with my family. and they slept in on Saturday morning, so it really didn't matter too much if I spent a little time prospecting. But I worked from 9 to 1 o'clock on Saturdays to set up my Monday and Tuesday just as full as I could get them. And I would go into the office on Monday. I would use that time from 8 to 9 to look up customers. If I knew I was going to see Mrs. Jones at 9 o'clock and that we had buried her husband 6 months ago, I wanted to have all of the information of what she had done for her husband, because most of the time people are going to do for themselves what they did for their loved one or something very similar. So I wanted to have as much of that information as I possibly could. So 8 to 9 on Monday, I spent doing my preparation. I would try to have as many appointments. I'd give myself 2 hours between each appointment, but I would book a 9, an 11, 1, 3. I'd stick an extra one in there at 4:30 and have a 6 and an 8. And you might say that is impossible. You really can't do that. I did that, not every time, but the thing to remember is that let's say I had every one of those slots filled, but my 3 o'clock appointment canceled or was a no-show. What did I choose to do with that time? You have to come back to the one of the two jobs. What should you be doing? So if my appointment fell out, I began prospecting. I was doing one of those two jobs at all times. Does that make sense? If anyone ever has any questions, just feel to jump in here. But Monday night was an appointment night for me. I would set appointments and run appointments on in the evenings a couple of days a week. That, as you can see here, that would be on a Monday and a Thursday. Tuesday nights, I had an appointment with myself to do prospecting. My goal was to always set and run my appointments within 48 hours. I just found that if I booked my appointments too far out in advance, I would sometimes then forget, or not forget, they would forget. And so they wouldn't be there. And so I always tried to set and run my appointments within 48 hours of setting them as much as possible. So I would phone on Saturday for Monday and Tuesday. I would begin phoning on Tuesday evening for Wednesday and Thursday. And any of the times where I had appointment slots that weren't filled, or if I had one that fell out, if you could just take out the appointment there and substitute in there prospecting. I was just trying to focus on doing one of those two jobs at all times. And that was my routine. And that worked very well for me. You don't necessarily have to use the exact same routine. I've seen many people who do prospecting every single day, and they use their morning to do prospecting, and they set appointments for later in the day, and that works very well for them. And so if that's your routine and it's successful for you, I encourage you to continue doing that. I would just also like to encourage you to consider, though, building in a time that's other than 9 to 5 so that you can reach some of those prospects that are working. Because when I am 56 years old, I am of the age, I already have my pre-need, but I am of the age where I am really, because I have getting into the prospect phase for people in my area that sell funeral prearrangement. I would be considered a prospect at this point in time. So the third thing that we're going to talk about here are the habits. Another book that I read by John Maxwell simply said, "You'll never change your life until you change something you do daily. The secret of your success is found in your daily routine." He's also talking about routine and the importance of routine, and how something doesn't become routine until you do it intentionally for a period of time. It has to be something done daily. It has to be something that's done intentionally in order for it to become a habit or a routine. If you think of habits, sometimes we think of those always as being bad. They're not bad. We have good habits as well, but just like the bad habits take a little bit of time getting into that, the good habits take a little bit of time to build as well. So we want to talk about installing good habits in what we do every day. So the first thing I want to talk about here is just setting yourself up to succeed. For example, if you were going to join a gym, would you join one that was just, around the corner from your house, or would you join one that's 30 miles away? you'd probably join one that's just around the corner from your house, because if you have to drive too far from it or too far to it, you're not going to stick with it and go on a regular basis. And so you're not going to have that habit of exercising because it's too hard. You're not setting yourself up to succeed by doing that. When it comes to appointments, there's some tips for good appointments as well. Know when to do your appointment setting during your productive hours, your 9 to 5. But like I said, if you want to have a pay raise, include some off hours of an evening or a Saturday morning. Set and run your appointments within 48 hours so that you're not having too many people that are forgetting that you're coming. Don't sell during the appointment setting phase. I would have people that would really start asking me questions about how much an average funeral costs, how much payments are. You can get into answering too many questions and eliminate the need for them to have you at your house, or eliminate the need for them to meet with you, whether it's at their home or whether it's at the funeral home. And when people would just say something like, well, can you send me something in the mail? It might sound corny, but I said it often. Really, ma'am, there's not a postage stamp big enough to send me in the mail. I am the information. And so I always strove to do my best to set that appointment and get in front of them, because I knew that that way, that was just the best way to answer their questions most effectively. Give a couple of time options, not open-ended. I've heard too many agents say, you know what, just call me anytime. I don't like that very well, because if you think about it, I heard somebody on here saying they're trying to get their license, and they're in the process of taking the test. We go through a process to become licensed. There's a lot of training that you've been through to become a professional, just like as if you were a licensed cosmetologist or a licensed real estate agent. Doctors, we are professional individuals, and our time is very valuable, just the same as our consumers' time is very valuable. And when we just say, you know what, I'm open anytime, just give me a call whenever's convenient for you, that just doesn't, it sounds as if we have nothing better to do, when in reality, there are hundreds of families that you will, if you are an active pre-need agent, that you will deal with through the course of a year. And so in order to be able to have time for that, your day, your time schedule is very important. So give a couple of time options. I've just found that if you're too open with people and you don't give them specific options, they have a hard time selecting as well. So, you know, don't be afraid to say, what about tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock or this afternoon at 3? Give them a couple of options. And if those don't work, they'll tell you can choose something else. Make sure your decision makers are there. I'm sure that Aaron and West have done a lot of training with you. We used to call them one-leg appointments, if that's what they still call them. But those typically don't end up being very effective. And oftentimes they're just going to, when it comes down to making the decision, they're going to put you off until they have the opportunity to speak with that other decision maker. So if you can ask just a few key qualifying questions, you can typically make sure that that other decision maker is going to be available. The other thing is thinking addition, not subtraction. So what I want to talk about here is you need to set some goals for yourself. Something that we did, my wife and I, when all this COVID started, we set some goals, some things that we wanted to do. And one of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to get the house painted, and I'm just about to finish that. The other thing is that we wanted to not sit around and gain the COVID-15, I think is what, people have been talking about. I know some of my account executives have been struggling with that because you can't get out and do just a whole lot. And so we tend to sit around the house and we want to eat all the time. So we made it a goal to join Weight Watchers and lose some weight. And so fortunately, we've been able to achieve some success with that. And we've just had to think of the long-term benefits. Even though at times we're hungry, we want snacks. And so, you have to figure out, how can I treat myself in a way that's in a good and positive way. So set some goals for yourself. Some of the goals that people will strive to achieve as an agent with homesteaders, for example, is going on one of our leaders conference trips. And I haven't updated this for just a little bit, so I apologize for that, but the principle is all the same. So we're going to walk through this. So let's just say that you need $700,000 net volume in order to go on leaders conference trip. You want to actually set your goal just a little bit higher than that, because some of your business may not all be qualifying business. So let's just assume that we want to achieve $750,000 in funeral prearrangements for the year in order to go on leaders conference. If you look at that in and of itself, that sounds huge. It sounds like it's impossible to do. And so you just need to break this down into a more manageable, smaller goals, if you will. So if you take the $750,000 and you divide that by 12, that's $62,500 each month that you need to write. And if you divide that by the average number of weeks, which is 4.3 in a given month, that's $14,535 per week that you need to write. The average contract size at homesteaders at the time I did this presentation was $5,125. Again, that's going to vary. You're going to need to tweak these numbers just a little bit based on where you live, because contract sizes vary depending on the part of the country that you're in. But if we divide that 14,535 that we need every week by 5125, that means we need basically 3 contracts every week that we write. So when you think of it that way, and you think of the appointments and the effort that you're putting in, the full-time effort in prospecting, going on appointments and so forth, you're closing, becoming good at overcoming objections, all those kinds of things, 3 contracts per week is not too much out of the question there. It shouldn't be at all, really. Go for a little PDA, public display of accountability. Share your goals. I encourage you, talk to Aaron, talk to West, whoever your manager is, share the goals that you have so that they can help you be accountable. I know that when I was an agent, I would call my manager every week, and I love what Wes talked about at the beginning of the call today, and you calling in and you getting points for the various activities that you're doing. That is exactly what I'm talking about here. Those little benchmarks can make a huge difference, because if we're working to attain those benchmarks, the sales are going to come. Some of the benchmarks that I had to reach, I didn't have to hit them all. I worked for all of these benchmarks, but the goal was to achieve at least one. As long as we achieved one of the benchmarks that week, we were good. Either needed to write the $14,535 in volume, or I needed to have been on at least 7 appointments that week, or I needed to have written at least 3 contracts that week. And if I didn't achieve any of those, I needed to have at least 100 contacts that week. Because if I'd had 100 contacts, all of these other things are going to follow. Does that make sense? So how did I do that? How do we stay disciplined in order to achieve some of these benchmarks? Simple little tools can make all the difference in the world. And you don't have to have a fancy printed up phone tally sheet, kind of like I've got here. Most of the time, I would simply sit down on a notebook sheet of paper, and I would write 1 through 10 across the top and 1 through 6 down the side. And you can see that would equate to about 60 different cells. And I use this merely as a form of discipline, something to keep me focused. I don't know if anyone else on this call has ADD, but I can have a little bit of ADD, and I can become distracted by things going on around me. And this was something that was very helpful to keep me focused. So every one of these cells represented an actual phone conversation. It did not represent a dial, because it may have taken me 100 dials to actually have 60 conversations, but it represented a conversation. And I would simply take, and I would, if they were interested and I set an appointment, it would be a check mark. If they were busy at the time and they asked me to call them back next week, that would be a dot. If they were not interested at all, it was an X. And I would make myself sit down and I would not let myself get up to do anything else until I finished a line. Usually took me somewhere in the neighborhood of an hour to do that. But if I had no appointment going on at that time, I would be able to talk to at least 10 people during that time slot. So this was just something that I used. And if I went to my manager and said, you know what, I haven't been able to set an appointment to save my life, the first question they were going to ask me is, how many people did you talk to? And I knew exactly how many people I talked to. That's using something as silly as this little sheet. But I encourage you, find a tool, whether it's this sheet or something else, something to keep you disciplined and focused when you're prospecting. This worked very, very well for me. The next thing in building good habits is find a success buddy. Find someone else that is also trying to achieve success, that's goal-driven and everything, just like you are, and you can help hold yourself accountable. We talked about your manager. Yes, Aaron is a great motivator. If you have a different manager, they're great motivators. The account executives with homesteaders can also be a great motivator, but you can also possibly find someone else outside of just your immediate manager, whether it's a spouse, whether it's your best friend. If you've got goals, you can be each other's success buddy and talk to each other on a regular basis and encourage each other. Competition and camaraderie is awesome. Again, I loved what Wes had to share, creating the competition, the contests, the points, all the different things that Envision is doing to help motivate. Those are exciting things, and they can really help break up the monotony of just daily routine, if you will. And then when you achieve your goals, when you hit that $14,535 for the week, or whatever your goal happened to be, or maybe you worked really hard all year long and you've achieved Leaders Conference, that is definitely a time to celebrate. But as you achieve the goals and everything that you've set for yourself, take the time to celebrate those things. They're important. Creating new habits, creating positive new habits, I encourage you to be patient with yourself. Many of us spend years creating bad habits, and it's going to take time to build good habits. One of the things that I catch myself doing sometimes is speaking very negatively to myself. We all make mistakes. We all do dumb things. We all have found ourselves scrolling through social media for too long. You can sit there and kick yourself and say, oh, you know what, I've just wasted the afternoon. I might as well go home and call it quits. Or you can say, you know what, I don't have much time, but I can at least make 5 more calls. Don't speak negatively to yourself. It takes time. Don't beat yourself up too bad. It just takes time to create positive habits, and you can do it. Anybody can. So I ask you to think about 3 things that you could commit to today. I'm not going to ask you to do it on this call, but the things that we've talked about, the choices that we make, the routines and habits that we do every day, or the routines that we create every day, and then the habits as those routines become habit, and setting ourselves up for success and all those types of things. What 3 things could you commit to doing every single day that's going to make yourself better, that's going to make yourself focus on one of those 2 jobs all the time, so that you can achieve the success that you're wanting to achieve as you go through this journey of pre-need? As I said, it's been something that's been a fantastic career for me for 26 years, and it certainly can be for you too. West, that's all I have.
Awesome, Greg. Thank you so much. You guys are welcome to unmute yourselves if you have any questions or any comments on what Greg has shared. Greg is, one that's been in this industry for how many years has it been now, Greg?
26.
26 years. So if you can imagine that, but also, one thing that is unique about Greg, especially in his position with homesteaders, is that he started right where you guys are at in selling and doing pre-need, working the day-to-day grind in prospecting. And so his experience is second to none with being able to really go through the whole cycle. And then, of course, the position that he's in now, which is really, again, drilling down to the individual consultant and what they do on a daily basis. So if you guys have any questions for him at all, it doesn't even have to be related to this particular topic. With his experience, feel free. You can chat him in the chat bar there if you want, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask him a question. Anybody have any questions for Greg?
I just want to real quick, Greg, thank you. I love that you always give me credit for this presentation, because this is actually the presentation I stole from you first. And I added to it, and now you've added to it. So yeah, I love it. This is great. You've done a fabulous job. A couple things stood out to me. You know, sometimes it's not rocket science and it's not new, but sometimes we have to rehear things. But we haven't talked for a while about the importance of setting an appointment within 48 hours. You know, people talk about, oh, I need more appointments to stick, and we have no shows and cancellations. And you know, that's such a good reminder. And we haven't really talked about that lately. But then on the 3 things, I'd love to hear maybe 1 or 2 things from the team that maybe people are thinking about that they could commit to. If anyone would like to share that.
I think just like making that commitment of calling 5 more people and seeing what that can do over a year, you know, as far as your income and then the number of families that you're also able to help.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You know, it just, I think there's actually a book out there called, well, I might be mistaken. I think the book is actually called Getting to Yes. And so a lot of people, they focus on, when they're prospecting, getting to yes, focusing on, you know, maybe their last call is they'll stop when they set an appointment. And then I have others that will do the exact opposite of that. They will prospect until they get as many no's as they can, because they know that the more no's they hear, the more yeses, you know, that they will also hear. And so that extra prospecting time, even if it doesn't end, let's say you decide you're going to make 5 more calls a day, and it doesn't end, that 5th one is not an appointment that you set, or maybe you didn't set any on the 5. Just know it's going to come. It's going to happen. For me, it usually took talking to about 10 people to set an appointment. And that, again, that varies by area. If I was in a large city, it might take me more. If I was in a small community where there was 1 funeral home, it might take me less. So it just varies.
Anyone else have any thoughts?
I'm just going to add one piece to this, and it's so important that you track it. I remember it, you know, I mean, over the years, we talked to a lot of counselors, and most of the time what we find, I'd even say as much as 90% of the time, when people are really struggling in sales, there are some exceptions, but it usually comes down to just the fact that they're not talking to enough people. And that's right. The number one reason. So if you're not tracking it, sometimes we'll get, well, I'm talking to a ton of people, but nobody wants to set an appointment. And we'll kind of drill down on that. We'll say, well, what does that mean? Like, how many people are you talking to on a daily basis? And sometimes, believe it or not, we'll get a response like, oh, I probably maybe talk to 5 to 10 people every day. It's just not enough. And so if you're not enough. Yeah, it's not enough. So again, if it's
not enough, and I want to add to that, Wes. I think that one of the biggest mistakes that I see people making, and that's why I kind of made a big deal out of, we have 1 of 2 jobs that we should be focused on and doing all the time. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see people doing in this profession, because I fought it as well. But if you were working at, let's just say Walmart, or in an office somewhere, and you had to punch a time clock, and you went in to work, and your hours were 9 to 5, and maybe you got 30 minutes off or an hour for lunch. All right, you wouldn't go up to your manager at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and say, you know what, I need to run my cleaning by the cleaners. I'm going to take a little bit of time off and go do that. or I'm going to make a run down to Dairy Queen, and I'm going to, go get, my Route 40 or Sonic. I'm going to go get me a Route 44 Diet Limeade. You don't do that, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when you're punching a time clock. But I find that oftentimes we feel so much freedom in what we do, and there's great advantages to the freedom in what we do. That's a huge benefit. As an agent, I could kind of build my schedule around activities that my kids had and stuff like that. So if I knew that when my children had a basketball game on an evening, a Tuesday night, I just didn't work that particular Tuesday night. I just filled in different times. But you've got to be disciplined with your time. And as Wes said, the tracking is very important, because sometimes we think that we're really busy when we really aren't. Making 5 calls is not really busy. Maybe we've helped the funeral home move a lot of flowers, but that didn't make you any money. That wasn't prospecting. It wasn't being prospecting, and it wasn't being on an appointment. And you've got to be doing one of those two things all the time with your job, with your time, if you treat this like a full-time job in order to be successful.
Amen.
I love that. I have to read Nicholas, who just had to step off for an appointment, but he said, and I appreciate his honesty, I'm guilty of leaving early in the day, especially if he's had a good day or week like last week. He says his commitment is actually working until 5, which I love. And I love the honesty about it. I mean, that's all, let's be honest, that's all of us some days. But some day, I've had a great week, I'm going to take off early. Like you said, run to Sonic, take it easy. But when you're on fire and you've got that momentum, that's when you want to pick up the phone. You've got that confidence. That's when you're going to have the best results.
I can't agree with that more. And that was one of the things that motivated me to spend a little time on Saturday morning, because if I could get my Monday and Tuesday set up, as I mentioned, one of the things of creating a good habit is setting yourself up for success. That was important for me to get my week set up for success, because if I could break the ice and make a sale or two on Monday, that set the tone for the rest of the week. Whereas if I went in with nothing on Monday, and then Thursday afternoon I'm scrambling because I haven't sold anything yet, then you're under pressure, you're under the gun. But if I could get my week set up so that I can break that ice and make that sale early in the week, and just set the tone for the rest of my week.
Love that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, lots of great wisdom today. Greg, thank you so much for taking some time. Any other comments?
Gary did say, oh my gosh, Hutchinson, the Air and Space Museum.
Yes, I've been there many times. The Cosmosphere. Oh,
well,
yeah.
Gary's in Las Vegas, so apparently he's been there as well. So that's fun.
Okay.
I grew up visiting family in Kansas, and they're in a little town called Denton, just north of Wichita. So we would occasionally go and visit Hutchinson. So
yeah.
No, I had a question actually, Greg. I'm sorry, West. If there's time, is there time for another question?
Yeah, absolutely.
My only question to Greg was, so here where I work, I work very, very closely with our funeral staff here. I'm actually also now part-time at-need staff here. I got my arranger's license. So I want to ask you, in your experience, how common is it to work so closely with the funeral staff, and what kind of relationships did that help you build with your client base and the families you serve?
I think it's very important. When I was an agent, and I'll be the first to admit that was several years ago. I have been employed by homesteaders for 16 years now. But the first 10 years of my career was spent in personal sales, if not 100%, a large portion of my time spent in personal sales. And especially when I first started selling for that funeral home in Hutchinson, Kansas, I worked out of the funeral home every day. I always tried to work out of the funeral home. It was my preference to do that. There were a few times where I couldn't. I remember one time I had to actually rent a hotel room for the day. They would give me a special rate in this little tiny town because the funeral home just had no room for me. But I tried to work out of the funeral home whenever possible. I just felt like it gave me a lot of credibility. Especially when I was making phone calls. Everybody has caller ID, And so when it showed up that it was Johnson and Sons Funeral Home or whoever it was I was selling for, that gave me credibility when I told them, this is Greg with Johnson and Sons. The other thing is that I did learn a lot from my funeral home, from the staff of the funeral home. Especially in the beginning, it was very important to me because I was included in on the weekly meetings. Our manager of the funeral home did a lot of training. He would take us all, including me, into the casket selection room. I learned everything about cathodic protection and the different woods, and I learned about vaults and all of that. And especially as a new person coming in, learning all of that, being part of the staff, I worked services every now and then so that I could be, meet people that were coming to the service. Every now and then I worked visitations. I drove a car a couple of times. I just really got to see the whole process, and it was very advantageous for me to learn, everything, so that when I was talking to families, I could speak intelligently to them. So it was very helpful. It also gave me a lot of credibility with the staff. Pre-need people, sometimes, I hate to say it, but sometimes it can be a little bit of a revolving door. It takes a special person who's willing to work commission, who's willing to put in the time and the effort. But if you are willing to do that, you can be quite successful. I'm married. I have a family. I had 3 kids that I was supporting. My wife didn't work. At times she would work part-time, but I supported my family being an agent. And so, being disciplined is super, super important. But having the credibility with the staff, when they saw that I was coming in every single day, they knew I was committed. And sometimes they would, set appointments for me. Most of my funeral homes worked very, very well for me because they knew I was committed to them and they felt comfortable with me because I spent the time around the funeral home. So I encourage you to do that if you can.
You have a question here, Greg, from Melanie Ciano. Her question on our chat was, hi, Greg, what was your combination of lead sources?
Again, I did this many, many years ago, and you have so many more lead sources. I'm kind of jealous now because now you do have leads that come from social media. You have all kinds of aftercare materials that I really didn't have then. There are so many things, but back in the day, if you will, mostly what we did was a lot of mail. So we did, just always working on different mail campaigns and things like that. Although I didn't have a mail house to send my stuff out. I had the letters. I licked a lot of envelopes and put a lot of stamps on letters, sending them out myself every single week. And there were many times, we can't do it now because of do not call. I literally would sit down with the phone book and I would just start going down the book. And I literally, in the small towns, if I was in a small town, I called everybody in town. And the day I had the most contacts, people that I talked to 80 people in one day. I had no appointments that day. And I sat there, I made my check marks and my X's and dots, just like I told you. The stuff I showed you there, those are simple, silly things, but I did them. It kept me on track. It's what helped me make my sales, qualify for leaders conferences and all the things like that. But I talked to 80 people, one particular day. That was my highest number of calls in one day.
That's awesome. Do you guys imagine that? 80 conversations in one day? That's phenomenal. So,
but most of my leads, it was phone calling. It was it was some aftercare. We didn't have the aftercare programs that we do now, but it did include some of that. Some of what I did, I would make photocopies of the register books, and the people that attended funerals, I would wait about 2 or 3 weeks, and then I would call them after they had attended the funeral, and because they had lost a friend or a loved one, death was somewhat on, top of mind. And so I would call them not really acknowledging that they had just been to a funeral. I just called them with my regular phone presentation to set the appointment. And I actually had a lot of success doing that.
I like the part where he acknowledged that we have way more lead sources.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, what you have at your fingertips now is so much more than I ever had. I had a telephone to make cold calls. I had a mail, we did mail campaigns and stuff, but other than that, we just didn't have the tools that we have now.
Yeah, picking up the phone book and getting to work is no easy task. That's quite
It's hard.
impressive.
It's hard. Yep.
Any other questions from anyone? This has been great. Okay, well, Greg, we've really appreciated this. I can just speak from experience. Greg has, obviously with his 26 years, and now has, I think once you get to 1,000 funerals under you, you probably stop counting. So that's pretty amazing. But I can speak for Greg. If anyone even ever wanted to reach out to him directly, I'm sure he'd be happy to chat with him. I've joked that he's one of the top 3 people. If I was in a car accident and couldn't get a hold of my husband, I would call, because he almost always answers my phone calls when I call him. So we really appreciate you, and great questions today. Is there any last minute thoughts or questions from anyone?
I'll add one last piece because I think that it's important. Yeah, as most of you know, a big majority of what we do is aftercare leads. And I think that sometimes we get a little bit stuck on the lead source of, is there a lead source that's better than another lead source? And I just want to just simplify this and strip it down. We do have leads that come from a lot of different things. And quite honestly, I don't think that there is one lead that's better than another lead. As long as I've been doing this, there really isn't. And I cold called just like Greg. I've been doing this for over 20 years. And we had a reverse directory, and we'd pick streets, and you'd work a street. Oh, yeah. So at least geographically, you could stay in the same area. There's a big fancy book. They cost like $700 or something, and we bought one every single year at the funeral home, and we worked from those. But at the end of the day, there's 2 things, and we talk about this in training, but a lead is defined as someone who does not own and is willing to listen. And there are tens of thousands of people in your community who fit that category. Now, we could drill down a little bit more. Most likely, they're going to be over the age of 60, and a few other things there. But at the end of the day, that is really the definition of a lead. So when we're getting leads from Facebook or from online seminars or from aftercare or from working or from whatever the lead source is, those are the only 2 things that you need to know when you're making a phone call. Is that they don't own and they're willing to listen. And all we're doing is we're not looking for people who want to buy a funeral plan. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for people who are willing to listen. And sometimes we make it way more difficult than it has to be in, well, what's the best lead source? There's not an answer to that, because what we're looking for is simply people who don't own, they're willing to listen. And we're not trying to see if they're ready to buy a funeral plan. We're simply calling people to see if they're open to receiving information. And we deliver that information with our personal wishes organizers. So when you rehearse that script of, our records indicate that you haven't received one of our personal wishes organizers. Today's Tuesday, right? And I'm going to be in your area. I have time Wednesday at 2:00 or Thursday at 4:00. Which of those times works best for you? Your prospecting needs to be no more complicated than that. And so as you're making those conversations and you're trying to figure out, well, what, is this going to be a good appointment? None of that makes a difference. And again, the 48 hours thing I think is extremely important if you can do that. But just simply saying, we served your family in the past, and how are you doing? Great. Our records don't indicate we've gotten you one of our free personal wishes organizers yet. And I'm going to be in your area tomorrow in the afternoon between 2 and 4, or Thursday afternoon between 2 and 4. Which of those days works best? That's as complicated as your prospecting has to be. I don't care if they have money, if they don't have money, none of those things matter. All you're trying to do is get in front of a family. And Greg's probably ability to set as many appointments as he did was probably because of the simplicity of his prospect.
Absolutely.
So, all right, you guys, we've gone a little bit over today. Thanks again, Greg. Thanks for all those who contributed to the conversation. We were going to cover a little bit of other stuff. It's not urgent though. This is, if we look at our quadrants, this is important and urgent. So we covered it. We have some important but not urgent stuff on the online seminars that we'll cover on next Tuesday. We'll just push that out to next week. So you guys, thanks so much. Appreciate each and every one of you for being on the call today. And make an extra 5 conversations today happen. Okay. Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good talking to everybody.